The intersection of some of my favorite media franchises might be a little strange.
Let the seas boil. Let the stars fall. Though it takes the last drop of my blood, I will see the galaxy freed once more. And if I cannot save it from your failure, Father, then let the galaxy burn. 大大大大好きなほど大好きなほど大好きなほど止まらないわがままなこの気持ち君は私の世界でただ一人大切な時間大好き
So, as you see, two of my big interests at the moment are 100 Girlfriends and Warhammer 40,000. A bit of a strange Venn diagram, but nonetheless. Because of that, I had some thoughts about what Warhammer armies each of the girls from 100 Girlfriends might choose. And I'm also including Rentarou as a bonus because why not? Also, Space Marine 2 is like launching right now, so I'm trying to ride that wave. I'll see if I get this video ready in that time. So here are some things I want to say before I get started. I'm assuming that each girl is fully committing to one army and are actually like choosing one. Because for some, like Tama and Sue, that might be a bit of a difficult thing to like. I'm just doing narrativium to get everyone to actually do the thing I want them to do. My whole reasoning is mainly going off of what I think could fit. So mainly going off of the vibes of each army, the lore, and a bit of the actual collection side of things. So I will try to give like proper reasons, though the logic behind and a bunch is pretty flimsy. Therefore, I will also include a rating of how certain I am with all of these choices. This goes from extremely sure to pretty sure to I guess a stretch, and I don't know, man. I also thought about what factions I should allow for this, because it's sort of a difficult thing to say, because there's several factions in the lore that don't get as much representation on the tabletop. So this is what I came up with. I'm including all of the factions with a codex or supplement, as well as all of the Space Marine chapters that have like characters and such. So Raven Guard, Salamanders, etc. And I'm doing the same for the Chaos Space Marine Legions. So I would also include like the Black Legion or Iron Warriors, and of course the Emperor's Children. Though the Emperor's Children are basically confirmed to be getting their own codex sooner rather than later, so I wouldn't have needed to do that for them if one had chosen that. And I'm also splitting up Chaos Demons into the four gods, because that way they're more thematic than just Chaos Undivided, and it's just like demons. So, beginning with Hakari, because her big thing is that she's horny. That's why I picked Slanesh Demons. Purely because horny. But you don't need to yell at me in the comments, because I know Slanesh is more about excess than like horniness, so yeah. Yeah, the AOS Hedonites of Slanesh range does illustrate that a bit more, but I'm not talking about Age of Sigmar right now, so yeah. Moving on to Karane. For her, I chose Sisters of Battle, mainly because I feel like Corona might be drawn to the whole strength and dedication while also remaining feminine, because that's like a bit of a insecurity she has, I guess. Then for Shizuka, I chose the Grey Knights because they are literally knights in shining armor. And that fits a bit better into Shizuka's like fairy tale thing. And also you can make the joke that the Grey Knights, because the range is fairly old, are fairly small compared to what they probably should be. And also they have the literal baby carrier that everyone makes fun of. So yeah, Grey Knights for Shizuka. Nano. Now, for Nano, I went on more of a efficiency angle on the hobby side of things. That's why I chose Imperial Knights, because they are just a few models. That's why I chose Imperial Knights, because an Imperial Knight army is usually just like a handful, or just like 4 or 5 models maybe, depending on how many armatures versus big knights you choose. So there's so yeah, they have a low model count, and you don't have to get all that many models ready to play. So Kusuri, I feel like the obvious one might be Emperor's Children, because they are sort of the faction that has, like, in lore, the most drugs. Kusuri's whole thing is drugs, and while that would be sort of fitting maybe with Emperor's Children, I feel like Kusuri's drugs are not like the narcotic type of drugs that Emperor's Children would do. There's of course the meth joke, but I went for a slightly different one. Because for Kusuri, I chose Death Guard, because they have the chemical weapons. Yay! Because yeah, Kusuri, there have been jokes about her bringing chemical weapons to school. What was it, the melt your face off drug? I don't remember off the top of my head. Now, Hahari is one of the first ones that I had some difficulty with, for which I ended up going with Adeptus Custodes. Now, that might confuse you, because Hahari is extremely rich, but she chooses what is by many considered to be the cheapest army to collect. I originally wanted to go for what is probably the most expensive, Titan Legions, because she seems like the person to just waste the money on these gigantic models that are just completely unwieldy and practical, and you can't really play more than one in a proper game, and it's just completely unbalanced. And I decided against doing Titan Legions, and went for Custodes, because I feel like Hahari would take these golden boys and girls and then cover them in real gold, because she's just that rich. And I actually looked up people who use like gold leaf on some models, and it just doesn't look as good, which I feel like that might fit as well, but I don't know. Contrasting the difficulty I had with Hahari, Kurumi was fairly easy. For her, I chose the Great Devourer, the Tyranids, because Kurumi, she also just eats a lot, and that just fits, I feel like. God, for May, I had so much goddamn trouble. I genuinely, for the life of me, could not come up with a really fitting faction among the official ones. So I just chose Space Marines. But not just any Space Marines. So I went for a certain fan-made chapter of Space Marines, the Space Maids. Because, come on, it's literally maids. And before you go, they're not an official faction. Fuck you, I make the rules, and I didn't define that they had to be official, I think. So yell at me at the comments all you want. I feel like right now it's sort of a zigzag of how difficult it is to choose a faction, because Iku is once again fairly easy to choose. Because her whole thing is masochism, and that's why I chose Drukari. Because their main faction ability is called Power from Pain. And that's their whole thing. And also, like, from the hobby side, remember the discussion Iku had with Mei about knitting versus sewing? And Iku preferred sewing because you could jab yourself with the needle. That's these models, because look at these spiky bastards. They are pointy. And I have poked myself with them and it hurt a lot. So yeah, she would choose Drukari. For me, I struggled once again. And ended up going with Adeptus Custodes, because they're sort of the handcrafted pinnacle of humanity. And I guess that would probably include beauty. So, I don't know. I feel like Custodes might fit. Then, Mei, I decided on Craftworld Eldar, because they're sort of fairly fast moving, and they rely on tricks, which I feel like that sort of fits Mei with her whole disappearing and substitution jutsu act nonsense. Also, going back to the Lapapillo chapter and the Ava reference, the Eldar Wraith Knights and Phantom Titans and such, they look more like the Avas than any of the mechs that Tau have. Chio, for her, I went basic and chose Space Marines because they're simple, easy to paint. And for the chapter, I chose Ultramarines because their whole thing is going by the book, and I feel like that fits Chio fairly well, I guess. I did consider Inquisition because they literally have the Adeptus Arbites, who are the police force, but I feel like that's sort of a bit excessive for it because they're more of a parody of police brutality, if anything. Sort of a Judge Dredd vibe. And I feel like that's too much even for our little mark here. Going over to Natty, I decided on Genestealer Colts, because they are literally the faction that's like guerrilla warfare freedom fighters. And they also have the Kellermorph, which is a literal cowboy gunslinger. Also, I do feel like Natty would miss the whole irony of them actually. The whole freedom they are fighting for is getting eaten by the Tyranids. And I feel like that might also fit, that she misses that whole aspect of it. I feel like that'd be funny. For Yamame, I had to choose which one was the most animal-esque of the faction, and decided on the Tyranids, because they're basically just like a gigantic locust swarm. But yeah, they're like the closest. They're like Tyranids are living things too. They just want to eat. They're just a little hungry. They're my second choice because unfortunately Eldar Exodites don't have models. Why don't we have the dinosaur riding elves, James Workshop? Please, give us the dinosaur riding elves. No, Momiji is one where I struggled with pretty heavily, because her character doesn't really lend itself to this, because the models are usually all hard plastic. And just by appearance, I then just decided on Sisters of Battle, because it's all women, and Momiji likes women's bodies and such. I don't know. This is probably the one she might like the most. I don't know. Now, Yaku, she's also one I had to think about, because she probably wouldn't get the whole science fiction stuff aspect. So I went with Imperial Guard, because they're like the most normal faction to someone who isn't like about science fiction and such. They're just like regular soldiers and tanks and such. Although that might trigger her PTSD because she was in the war, and I don't know. Then for Kishika, because there are no mommy or baby factions in Warhammer, I decided to focus on the whole chivalric and knightly aspect. So I chose Imperial Knights because they're all about knightly households and their chivalric codes and such. So that would fit her fairly well. Then for Arco, I struggled a lot because I had to think what's probably the cutest of the factions, and that question doesn't really fit all that well into the grimdark future of the 21st millennium. And I just ended up giving her Leagues of Wotan because they're sort of short and stubby, and I think like the Ironkin, like the little robots they have, are kind of cute. And no one else, spoilers, takes the Space Dwarves. There's sort of a bit of a cuteness in Nurglings, but I don't know if Akko's into the whole gross cute type thing. And also the rest of Nurgle is just gross instead of cute. So yeah, that doesn't fit her at all. Then, for Uto, perhaps Alpha Legion. Maybe she also could have chosen Tzeentch or Thousand Sons, but maybe not. I feel like the whole are they loyal, are they traitor things, the perhaps and perhaps not of Alpha Legion fits better than the chaotic randomness and change of Tzeentch. And it turns out that she's actually Alpharius all along. I went with the Space Maids again, because Mai would definitely try to match with May. And yeah, it just fits. Then for Momoha, surprisingly, I didn't go with Slanesh. Instead, I went with Sisters of Battle. Now, hear me out, because despite her lack of inhibitions, which might seem fairly Slaneshi, she still sort of has a strong moral code and has a strong sense of like ethics still. That's why I don't think that Slanesh would fit. And yeah, that's sort of that whole like virtuous stuff. I feel like she'd go with the fairly church-inspired Sisters of Battle, maybe. I don't know. Rin was very easy to choose once again, because she's all about violence and blood. Who else is about violence and blood? The World Eaters, because they worship Khorne, the blood god. This is where the phrase "blood for the blood god, skulls for the skull throne" comes from. I mean, come on, it's just perfect. Also, remember the whole Chainsaw Man plushie thing? The World Eaters have chain swords, and chain axes, and chain glaives. Basically any weapon you can think of, they made a chainsaw version out of that. And also, this panel is essentially what a round of World Eaters combat would sound like if there were sound effects. This is the face of the average World Eaters players grinding through whatever unit their Khorne Berserkers are in front of. Now, for Sue. Sue is also another one I struggled with quite heavily. I ended up with what is probably the most flimsy reasoning for her, because like the numbers gimmick is pretty hard to find something for. And in the end, I decided on Tau, because the battle suits technically are like numbered. So we have the XV-25 stealth suits and the XV-88 broadsides, I think they were. Yeah, this one is probably the biggest stretch. Now, for Ira, I chose, once again, Custodes, because they are probably the closest ones to, like, martial arts-based armies. They have the whole mortal kata and stances thing. They're like the exemplars of martial perfection. Now, Tom is another one I struggled with because there's not really like any cat-heavy factions in the official Warhammer, so I went for Space Maids again because they're not just maids; they're cat maids. I literally did not have any other idea for what I could have chosen for Tama. Now, Himika's another one which I feel like is a bit more certain. I chose Admech because, well, they are fucking weird. Like, they amputate body parts. They replace flesh with metal prosthetics for basically fun, and they use like servitors and other lobotomized stuff all the time. They have like the weird arc and phosphor weapons and radiation everywhere. So like they're the war crimes, and that's pretty abnormal. Matsuri, she was pretty easy. For her, I chose orcs because
It's obvious, you get.
they speak Cockney. She is Cockney in the fan translation. She gives that vibe of someone who might enjoy orcs. Now, Usami is another one that's very easy. I just thought she needs a lot. Who is the biggest horde? And I'm gonna say Tyranids, because they are the horde. Like, if you are a fan of the Warhammer podcast, they once did an episode of absurd army lists you could play, and they did one that was just 327 models. I feel like she might unironically play that meme list that's just clogging the board with bodies. Okay, so Meru, for her, I also chose Craftworld Eldar, but for a different reason than Mei. And that Craftworld Eldar are like they're sort of the dying race that's fallen from grace, that still persists despite the great fall, and basically pure despair that awaits at the hands of Slanesh when they die. So I think she would like them pretty well. And the last one of the current girls, Saki, for her I chose the Necrons, because they're sort of in the lore the most ancient of the factions. They've just been asleep for several million years and have now just woken up and like boomers trying to get the kids of their lawn. The lawn in this case being the galaxy. And finally, as a bonus, for Rentarou, I'm choosing Space Marines because he seems like a Space Marine kind of guy. And he probably admires their endless dedication to their duty, just like his endless dedication to his girlfriends. I'm not sure about what chapter, though. Maybe Ultramarines, maybe Imperial Fists, maybe even Salamanders, because they're all kind of nice in spite of everything. But I do think Imperial Fists might fit him most, because they're like the ones that are all about duty. If you have reached this point in the video, thank you for listening to my insane ramblings. If you somehow enjoyed listening to me talk about some random nonsense, please consider liking this video and subscribing to my channel. I would appreciate it very much. Thank you for watching. Bye for now, my dear viewers, and have a wonderful day.